So we're in person for the second time at my house
on a Wednesday.
on a Wednesday recording. So Tana and I are super excited. These are always a little bit better when you get to do them in real life. Today we're going to talk about the lines on the Enneagram, but before we jump into that, do you want to give our Enneagram adventure spiel?
Oh my gosh, I'd love to. So Holly and I are IEQ 9 certified, and so we're certified coaches with the Enneagram. And what that means is the Enneagram, if you have not followed along this is our 12th episode. 12?
It is, yeah, 12.
If you have not followed along up until this point, the Enneagram is a tool used to understand your motivation. So dissimilar from other personality assessments that you may be familiar with. DISC, as an example, it's focused on your motivations rather than your behaviors. So focusing on why you do the things that you do rather than just the do the things that you do part of that equation. So what else would you add? Anything I've missed?
No, I don't think so, other than we use this as a tool for personal and professional development with ourselves, other individuals that we know, teams. So we've been working with this for a while and we love it. See all the opportunities for growth in it. So, like I mentioned before, we're going to talk about the lines on the Enneagram today. So if you're listening, you're going to have to picture the 9-pointed Enneagram symbol. And if you think about that, it's sometimes described as a 9-pointed star, although it's not even in any way. It's slightly off center. Tana's going to hold up the book with a picture. But again, you're listening, so you can't see that. But anyway, that 9-pointed star, every single number has 2 lines going off of it. So then each number is associated with a point. Those lines point to other numbers, and those are the stress line and the growth line, depending on what Enneagram teacher you listen to. The IEQ 9 assessment calls them stretch and release lines, and then sometimes they could also be called stress and security lines. So these terms are interchangeable-ish, but just if you're listening to other Enneagram content or seeing things on Instagram, you might see them referred to as with different titles. So if we start with, do you want to start with stress or?
Oh my God, why not? It feels most relevant for me today.
It's okay, great.
Yeah. We're in it. We're so in it. So do you want to start with one? Like, do you want to go around, or is there a number that is speaking to your soul?
Oh my goodness.
I had a conversation with a 3 today.
You want to start with 3?
Yeah. Kinda. That's my vote.
That's your vote? Okay, we're going to start with 3s then. So 3s move to 9 when they are stressed. And what that means when we think about this move on the line and the connections between the numbers on the lines is there's a polarity in that. So 3s and 9s are sort of opposite of each other in some ways, in terms of their behaviors, in terms of their motivation, and the way they sit on the line. And what we think about on the stress line is that as the 3, who's the competitive achiever, starts to feel stress, they move towards the lower integration portion of 9, or the less healthy behaviors of the 9 when they're particularly stressed. And we're talking like maybe there's like change fatigue, they're really, really stressed. This maybe isn't sort of the baseline operating in the world level. This is like a tick deeper for them to, because they'll take on the bad behaviors of their own number before they'll go to the bad behaviors of their stress number. Hopefully that's not too confusing.
Well, this is important because if you're ever questioning your number, it's important because the behaviors specifically that Holly mentioned on the low side of whatever your stress line is are also behaviors that you might show up in, not just the low side of your own number.
Right.
So if there's something that's particularly -3, right? Let's say you're a 3 that's upset about somebody being inefficient and not using your time the way that it should be used, because threes have this concept that like they have their own time that they need to get things done. And if people are messing with that
Yes.
resource, it's a trigger. So let's say that's your issue and you're behaving in a really low side of 9. So that could show up like,
It's like apathetic, like lazy, kind
yeah,
of, which is not typical of threes, right? Threes are like go-getters, moving, taking action, and all of a sudden, like something gets really stressful for them, and it's like, ugh, I don't want to do anything. I have heard when I've taught the Enneagram, and it stuck out to me, one three in particular talks about when she hits that point, it's like full on lay on the couch all day, binge Netflix, do nothing. So it's that kind of deep procrastination, avoidant, kind of low side of 9 behavior.
So I bring it back to that's why it's important, because some of your negative behaviors when you are particularly stressed are not always, low side of your number. They could be low side of your stress
Of your stress number.
number.
Yeah. I think so. We just gave this kind of example of 3 and 9, how they sit on the polarity. And I realized I should have probably led, I mentioned when we talked about wings that I find that to be the least interesting part of the Enneagram. And when I was learning the Enneagram, taking classes in it during COVID, the lines is what I found most interesting and where I personally found the most opportunity for self-awareness and growth. So I should have led with that, but that's why this is important. And hopefully you guys can stay on track with us as we talk through the rest of the numbers and try to give some more examples. Okay, so 3 goes to 9. Do you want to go
Yep.
4?
Yep.
So when 4s are particularly stressed, they go to 2. That looks like when we think about the lowest sort of behaviors of a 2, which we talked about in the 2 podcast a little bit, it can be sort of the manipulation, the give to get kind of attitude, the I'm not going to do that unless can have this. It can show up as I'm doing all these things and now I'm going to resent you because you are not being grateful for the things I'm doing for you. Those kind of things can show up in the 4 when they go to a stress place.
Oh my God, I am such the ick. I am a 2 for a refresher. And that is how I'm showing up at home right now. And I am the ick. So for everybody listening, like, it's a good reminder. Like,
Yep.
I will never perfect this, but like, that's the way that I am showing up right now. I'm like, look at all of the things that I am doing. The many things. The many things. And look at what you're not doing. And my poor husband.
You gotta give yourself some credit. Maybe what we should do now, because we did 3s and 4s, let's go back to 2s. Let's go back to 2s. So we just talked about, 4 goes to the low side of 2. Again, if you look at the symbol, there's a line that connects 4 and 2. That's how that works. But 2s, when they are stressed, so when you've moved past sort of those low behaviors that are the 2 behaviors of the resentment and maybe the gift get manipulation, all of that, what happens is you move to the low side of 8.
Oh, she gets angry, she gets direct, she gets combative, she gets argumentative, controlling. Yeah, it's very reactive.
Yeah.
So if you think back to 8 conflict style, reactive. But yeah, it's an area of development that I'm working on. I'm currently sitting on the low side of 2, which means I haven't graduated to that just yet in this particular time period. So I'll be unpacking some work with Brandon on Friday, and I'm going to show up with more gratitude.
Yes.
That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. There's lots of work to do when we find ourselves in the stress number. So we'll do the head types next. So we just did 2, 3, 4. Let's do 5, 6, 7. So 5, since we just picked on you, we can pick on me.
Yeah, let's talk about 5s.
5s, and if you remember back to, I think, the 7 podcast, we talked about that 5s go to 7 in stress. This is one of the reasons why it was like such a huge development, like aha self-awareness moment for me, was when I'm particularly stressed, I create more chaos in my own life. The reason I'm creating it is I'm trying to offload the bad feeling. Talked to Brandon about this recently, right? Like I'm trying to offload the feeling by doing something, and so I create chaos. So the example that we talked about when we talked about 7s was when I came home and told my husband that I needed to remodel the living room after a stressful work trip. And you would think, well, isn't that just going to like double down your stress? Well, yes, it actually is just going to double down the stress because now I've torn my house apart. But in the moment, the action of like creating something,
because it's a body feeling,
moving the energy is what I needed. Yes, this is what Brandon and I unpacked. I'm like, this is why I create my own chaos, is because I don't like how it feels to be stressed. It feels better to go do something. So I'll just go do something impulsively.
For those listening, her sweatshirt says wild, aloof, rebel. I'd just like to capitalize on that moment because we're talking about a stress line
Here
for
we
you.
are.
And I love your ownership of this. It's very 5.
It's very 5.
It's very 5 channeling 7 energy.
It is. Do you know what this is from?
No.
David Rose wears a wild, aloof, rebel sweatshirt.
Oh.
But his is white. When this one's black, I can't have a white sweatshirt's dangerous for me.
Yeah, I mean, same.
Yeah. So.
I mean, same. I just throw caution to the wind.
Yeah.
You know?
But we did. Aaron actually got this for me because of 5s are often called aloof. So. Yeah. But you're right. The saying is even like very 5 to 7. It's very 5 to 7. Okay. All right, we'll keep going. We will try not to rabbit hole too far on that.
Okay.
But the other ways that the 5 can show up in the stress is it could be seeking an escape. It might not be creating chaos. It could be, I'm going to plan a vacation immediately, or I need a new job, or I need a new house, or something. I need whatever, something that like moves that energy. It doesn't have to be as big as some of the things I've done in my life. Okay, so 6s.
Like training for ultramarathons.
Like training for Well, that's like that's a whole other issue. Well, we can unpack that later.
I just didn't know if you wanted to linger in this discomfort any longer. We can keep it moving.
Well, the training for ultramarathons is more about my subtype, if you remember, than my stress line.
That's what she's telling herself.
We're going to go with that. Nothing to do with childhood trauma at all. Nothing. Okay. 6s. We're moving on. We're going to 6s. 6s move to 3 when they are stressed.
Low side of 3. How do you feel about low side of 3? Because I think for a 6, the way that I've seen it is it matters if that 6 is counterphobic or not in their stress line of 3.
Whether or not it's like a rejection or a pulling closer in terms of authority.
And it can show up different, but some of the low side of 3 behavior can be like kind of bulldozy.
Yeah.
Like
real competitive, like in a kind of not normal way for them.
Like a really bossy kind of, like I've seen it where they kind of show up where they are very flippant about, and if there's a significant amount of feelings involved in anyone's scenario, they're very like, that's inefficient.
Or wanting to win the argument, because maybe they're not outwardly competitive, like win a game, like win a whatever, but it can be this, I'm going to win the argument and I'm not going to stop until you have conceded and I have won. That's
why, like, sometimes when I'm in that kind of interaction with a 3, I get particularly triggered. And then I find you and, ma'am?
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, you do know why that is, right? It's like you're the problem.
Yes.
Damn.
All of us. Yeah. Okay. So that's 6s go to 3.
Mm-hmm.
7s, when they are particularly stressed, they go to 1. And we
Mm-hmm.
did touch on this in the 7 podcast just a little bit about how unnerving that can be. When the 7 makes this move on that line to 1, and they get kind of sarcastic and they get kind of biting and maybe they're a little undercutting, that kind of thing can throw people off when 7s are normally like bright,
Mm-hmm.
shiny, happy
Mm-hmm.
people. So there's that. There's also a thing in the stress for 7s because it's not always aimed at other people. Sometimes it's like they'll get really hard on themselves.
Yeah.
It'll be like, I'm going to stick to a schedule. I'm going to do all the things right. I'm not going to make any mistakes. But they'll like kind of double down on that inner critic
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll double down on that, and then sometimes it can read like they're mad at everyone
Yes.
around them.
Yeah.
The energy empath in me, when that happens with a 7, is like so anxious. So anxious. I'm like, you're bright and shiny. What's wrong?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
Stop it.
But I also know a few 7s and 1s that can bring out the best in one another if
Yes.
they give the opportunity, because they each have something that the other does not in times of not stress, you know?
I was recently talking with a 7 in terms of like professional relationships, and she has someone who's an Enneagram 1 that reports to her. And we talked about the idea of like how they sit opposite each other on that line and how they have the opportunity to really help each other grow through that. Because when the 1 is in a really healthy space, can the 7 look at that healthy space and think, and this is the point I'll say more about this in a minute, but when that 1 is in a really healthy space, can the 7 look at the healthy behaviors of a 1 and think, how do I adopt those when I'm stressed rather than the negative ones?
I had that same conversation with a 7 that reports to a 1.
Oh, yeah.
In
The other
reverse.
way.
Yeah, the
Yes.
other way.
Yeah.
Funny.
Okay, so 7s go to 1. So then 8s go to 5 when they're particularly stressed. And so it can read a little bit like, I'm going to take my ball and go home. I am not interested in being with you anymore. I am out. And for an 8, that's what it can look like. It's a pulling away, it's a withdrawing, it's a desire to be alone. And again, not dissimilar to 7s, for example. Sometimes when 8s do that, it can be shocking to people around them if they didn't expect it.
Yeah, I would say, so my husband is an 8. I would say all of that rings true. And if you think back to the 2 podcasts where I'm like, when I know he's upset, the anxiety that I have of that withdrawing, where I'm like, are you mad at me? Are you mad at me? Are you mad at me? And he's like,
No.
leave me alone.
Yeah.
Or it'll be like I want to talk about it, but not right now. And I'm like, oh my God. There are like few things that make me that uncomfortable. That's the like, I have something to tell you, but not right now. What? What have I done? Are you mad at me?
Oh my God. Yeah, that move for 8s to 5.
Or sometimes when you go into stress, I'm like, are you okay?
Would I go to 7 or would I go to the low side of 5?
Low side of 5.
Oh, yeah.
Low side of 5. I'm like, what's the vibe?
It's
feeling off.
I just don't have anything to say about anything.
It's feeling uncomfortable for me, and selfishly, I need you to unpack your feelings right now.
All right, too. Okay, so 8, 9s go to 6 in stress. And being married to a 9, I think we talked about this when we talked about 9s a little bit, maybe? Can't remember how much we talked about this. But I have multiple 9s in my life. I don't see them go into stress very often, any of them. One, I think In some cases, they cover it really well because they don't want to rock the boat and they're going to keep it all inside and it builds like an anxiety. But the move to 6 on the stress line is the anxiety for 9s. It's becoming really worried about things that they can't control or overly concerned about making sure things are taken care of in some way. I know for Aaron, those moments are often all of a sudden it's like, this is how much money we have in the 401k, or this is how much we still owe on whatever, the mortgage or the car payment or the whatever it is. Like all of a sudden we have this like worry about this thing that we almost never talk about, but now we're going to talk about it. And that can be an indication that he's got some stress going on. All right. So 1s, that's the last number we have to say the stress line. 1s go to 4 in stress. And I've experienced this with several 1s that I know professionally or have known professionally. It is when they are stressed, it is a commitment to that no one could possibly ever understand them. And they just believe that when they're in that really stressful place, it's just a really hard thing for them to get out of. No one could possibly understand how hard they work, how hard they're trying, all the things that they're doing to try to be good and perfect, and nobody could possibly understand any of that. That's where they kind of go in that space, and it becomes like very internal. And I think also in that space for them is there's probably some really terrible inner critic stuff.
Yeah, they talk really bad to themselves.
Yeah. Okay, so we've made it through all of the stress numbers. Before we move on to the growth or security line, I do want to point out that this might not be intuitive for some people, but that move on the stress line is where if you're looking for personal growth in the Enneagram, it's the move on the stress line where you can have the most personal development. How do you look at the behaviors that come out when you're stressed and 1, develop the awareness for them, but 2, think about if I were the healthy version of my stress number, what would that be instead? And that's where you can have a lot of growth. It won't be easy. I'm not saying this is easy, but that's where you will have more growth. So for me, it's like, okay, when I come home and I want to create chaos, well, what would a healthy 7 do? Should be like the lens that I try to put on it if that is how I'm wanting to grow and relieve stress. And so the thing I will share, this little tagline, is one of my favorites. It's that stress and growth are not in opposition of each other. Growth comes from stress well managed. So how do we find the ways to manage the stress through the healthy side of our stress number? Anything you want to add to that?
No, I love that. You grow through what you go through, my friends.
Yes.
And I think, so for me, that would be healthy side of 8, where I would be showing up really confident, really grounded, not having to verbally process through all of my things and get really combative and try to be right.
Yeah.
And get the word in, but thinking about it a bit more logical.
Yes.
Rather than through a lens of anger.
And I would say too, on the healthy side of 8, it also could be, more trusting in yourself too. That's one of the things often 8s do really well, is they're good at trusting their gut and knowing what they want. And so that could be the other healthy part of it, is like, how do you really trust yourself?
We just talked about something else about that today. I have a lot of work to do on a 1 hour with Brandon on Friday. Brandon, I'm going to be listening to this after our call, but
I don't know if he listens to this at all.
There's a lot to unpack on Friday morning. Abandonment issues? Who, me? Who?
No. Okay. All right. So we've made it through stress numbers. All right. So let's move to growth and security lines. It's the same line. The reason that it's sometimes called, this line has sort of two sides. And we just talked about on the stress line, right? Like how you can grow into the healthy behaviors of your stress number. So on the growth line, the reason it's sometimes called the security line is that you can sometimes take on the negative behaviors of your growth number.
Mm-hmm.
And so that comes from a place of security. So this episode's not about soul child, but the line of your growth number is also where soul child theory comes from, which I believe is part of the reason why it's also called the security line. So if you remember when we've touched on soul child theory in other episodes, the idea is that you were, as a tiny, tiny kid, you were headed in the direction of being a certain number. Something happened. Something could have been traumatic or just perceived as traumatic to you as a small child. And that then made the direction you were headed unsafe in your family. And so you headed in the literal opposite direction to the other number. So to use we'll just start with 5s, go to 8 as the growth number. And I'll talk about how that shows up when it's healthy. But when you think about that from soul child theory, it would mean that as a small, small child, I was on track to be an 8. And my mom would confirm this. I was a wild kid. I was climbing all over things all the time. I was a little bit loud, I think, outspoken, busy all the time, very, action oriented as a small child. I mean, I fell and broke my arm when I was 2 because I was climbing on a stool in my grandma's house, right? So, like, very, very, very active, independent. And that switched through my sort of upbringing, divorce, childhood stuff we're not going to unpack today, to where it was no longer safe for me to be that wild kid. It was more like, you need to be quiet, you need to stay in your place, safer to be seen and not heard, safer to not be seen at all, actually. And so that then drove into the 5 place. Okay, so that's like soul child and the growth line.
Yep.
As a growth line, what it means is that when I'm in what I would call flow, I show up like a healthy version of an 8. I can command a room. I feel confident in whatever it is that I'm sharing. I don't hold back. I can be really direct. All of those things. So that's on the growth line, how it shows up as the security line. And the reason it's called the security line is that when I'm with people that I feel very safe and secure with, I'll let the less positive things of the 8 come out. So it could be like, I want something in the house just a certain way, and I want to control that. Or maybe I'm less nice to my husband about something, right? Like maybe I'm overly direct with him, or I'm more outward with the anger. I don't keep it stuffed down. Okay, so that's growth and security. And using 5 to 8 as the example. Before we go on, do you want to say anything about any of that?
I think I would just add that we will do an episode on Soul Child, by the way. That seemed to spark some interest from a lot of people.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, it's a little bit of the deep work that Holly and I talk about with Brandon, that you explore a little bit of where you started and unpack, where you arrived today through some of that work. And I would strongly encourage, and I know we do this on every episode, so broken record, but I would strongly encourage anyone who is interested in the why to start exploring that deeper work, whether it be through therapy, whether it be through a coach, any of those things.
Yeah, for sure. All right, since we started with 5, do we want to just keep going with the head numbers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go.
So 6s as their security or growth line go to 9. That can look like for them not feeling like they need to be hypervigilant, not feeling like they need to be prepared for everything, not feeling like the world is going to
Go with the
go,
flow.
yeah, they can
Like,
be more relaxed. It's okay to not have a plan.
mm-hmm.
They can chill out, right? And not feel the need to protect themselves. So that's the 6s go to 9.
Yeah.
7s go to 5. So when 7s are in their growth or security line, they will move to 5. And so what it'll look like is being more introspective, taking time to slow down and think things through.
Slow down and get all of the information.
Yeah, rather than kind of 7s are kind of known for being such quick thinkers that they can jump to conclusions without the full picture. When they're in that healthier space, they'll take the more time
Yep.
to do that.
Yep.
Okay.
8
8
goes to
goes to
2.
2.
8 goes to 2. So for them, that shows up like a little bit more empathy, more emphasis on emotion, more apt to care and understand the individual that they're potentially in conflict with, as an example. It could also show up like they are emotionally tied to the greater good of whatever it is that they're trying to do. So it can read more positive than negative. What else would you say? Oh, besides more feeling oriented, like they're potentially a little bit more vocal about those feelings as they're moving through it. Not necessarily a 2 trait that they're vocal about their feelings. That's what we'll get to with the 2, but that they're identifying the feeling that isn't just anger.
And they're more in tune on that growth line, I would say. They're more in tune with what's happening around them.
Mm-hmm.
It can be common. We talked about this earlier today. It can be common for 8s to lose that intuitive ability to read a room.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard 8s talk about it where it's like, I don't have that. I don't pick up on vibes. I don't understand what's happening in the room. That's a learned behavior that they picked up in childhood. They do actually have the ability to do that, but sometimes they need to wake that back up to be able to like be plugged into the feelings of the people around them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
9.
9s go to 3 in as their growth number. And it's funny, we talked about this yesterday actually about 9s in terms of on the security side. It's where the real competitive part of 9s comes out. So I found out
We did talk about this.
I found out yesterday. we mentioned on the 9 podcast I won't play Monopoly with Aaron. I found out actually from 2 other 9s that they have similar rules in their houses that they will not play, that like their families will not play Monopoly with them. And it has to do with that. For them, it's that move to 3 that makes them have that more competitive side coming out. That's like the security side of it. But on the healthy side, it's like that let's all win together when we think about the healthy side of a 3. When a 3 gets it and
when they're motivated, when they're driven toward the thing that they want to accomplish. So it might not feel like apathy or like, oh, I'll just, I'll figure it out or I have more time.
And it can become an outlet for them to let that competitive side come out on that growth line. For Aaron, that's in the triathlon space. He's a very talented triathlete, but I'd roll my eyes about it because I have to work so hard and he comes very naturally to him. But it gives him this space where he can be competitive in a place that feels safe, but he can kind of let that side of him come out.
Well, and it's so individual, which is like interesting, like in the moment.
Yeah.
It's very me against me. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So 1s
go to 7.
1s go to 6. Yes, as a growth line. I was like, wait a minute, stress is at growth. We're on growth. 1s go to 7 as their growth line. You and I know a 1. You and I know a 1 who you could tell he was in his growth side when he was like wandering around, sort of singing songs, giving everybody nicknames, being,
silly.
and like kind of happy-go-lucky. Yeah, you could tell he was moving into that 7 space of like the happier side of things, letting the inner critic go, some of that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a good example.
Yeah. So 2s.
We travel to 4, which this is also the work for me, you guys, because this is the lowest number that I am. LOL. She's a work in progress.
You just buried that little 4 down in there
Yeah,
real deep.
she's down there somewhere.
Yeah.
But it shows up for me particularly on the creativity side, where I become much more flexible, much more creative, even literally creative. Like if I pick up a hobby that is more creatively driven. I used to knit a time. There was a time in my life
Oh, I didn't know that about you.
where I knit. It's all still in the basement. And Landon's like, can we get rid of this? I'm like, no, I'll be healthy someday.
Maybe you need to join craft club.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it shows up like that, but it also shows up where I'm able to name the emotion that I'm having and accept it for what it is and allow it to take up some room, where emotions and me having emotions outwardly are a burden as a 2 is the feeling. So it shows up both for me in the creativity side, so high side of 4, but also able to name the feeling and say, yep, I feel like that. It also kind of is like allowing me to be an individual rather than part of something else.
Yeah.
So that's how I would describe my travels to 4. But yeah, we're working on more 4 vibes. We're working on it.
We've come up with another creative pursuit.
This is creative.
This is creative. Yeah.
Look at me.
Yeah.
Growing.
Yeah. This is grow.
Look at me growing.
Any of the things on our Instagram that are not clips of this podcast, that are like what was the one you did most recently?
Oh, I think it was
unhinged email sign-offs.
Yeah.
Any of those are all Tannah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the 4 side.
That is the 4 side. I should do more of those.
Yeah.
That's a good outlet. I think from a parenting side of it, I do lean towards my growth line because I never want my kids to feel like their emotions can't take up space.
Yeah.
So I tend to err on the side of like, if I catch myself being like, oh my God, you're being so dramatic, because they're 6 and 3 and they're dramatic. Like, they embody drama. They are the drama. So so I'll catch myself in those moments being like, that probably wasn't a kind thing to say. Or it looks like me laying in bed and having a conversation with my 6-year-old when he's like, how was your day? And I'm like, it was okay. I didn't do really well at, and then I name something. And he's so cute. He's like, well, you can do better next time. I'm like,
thank you.
Melt me.
Yeah.
Melt me. But it shows up like, what was your highlight of your day? What was the low light of your day? Oh, I'm sorry you felt that way. Like being able to sit in it with them, which is selfishly a little bit of practice for me. Like I use them to be like, look at you sitting in that. I'll try that someday. Look at you.
That's good. All right. We got 3s left.
3s.
So 3s go to 6 as their growth line. So when we think about 6s in a healthy space, when they are trusting themselves, when they are knowing that they're gonna be okay no matter what, they're prepared for it.
That loyalty piece.
Yeah, they're loyal. They're showing up in, one of the sayings, my 6 friend that we referenced in the 6 episode, she does listen to this, by the way, so hopefully she catches this, but one of the sayings that's most commonly associated with her is shows up, loves hard. She's gonna show up for her people.
I love that.
Yeah, and so I think that's the move for 3s to 6. So we really talked mostly about how it shows up as a growth opportunity, less about how it shows up as security. I'm just going to say this. If you're interested in the security side and you think you want us to talk more about that, message us. Let us know if that's
Yeah.
interesting to you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it could just be something for you to, as you're on your own Enneagram journey, to just sort of explore.
I think a good way to start that conversation is just maybe writing down or thinking of a few questions. For example, you referenced your mom. Like, if you could ask someone that knew you at the very beginning,
Yeah.
when you were just blossoming into a young human, what were you like? That might help you start with, okay, how did that show up or where did that change?
Yeah.
And how do I embody a little bit more of that energy?
Yeah. And I think if I don't want to turn this into all soul child, but if that's what you're curious about, again, it is that move on the growth or security line that would indicate that soul child theory for you. And just remember, it doesn't have to be, in my case, it's kind of a traumatic story. It doesn't have to be a super traumatic story. I listened
Mm-hmm.
to somebody, an Enneagram teacher, she was talking about her own kids and the shift that she saw in one of them over the like washing of it was like either the favorite teddy bear or the favorite blanket when they were little. And that there was a shift that happened in them when she took that thing and put it in the washer and the kid couldn't have it for the 45 minutes or the however long the wash cycle was. But that was enough to sort of shift the kid's behavior. So it doesn't have to be hugely traumatic to have a
Yeah.
shift.
Yeah. It could be like a series of events too. I would say
Yeah.
that in my case, it was like many data points of things like around the environment that triggered a shift and then reinforced the shift.
Yeah. All right.
I think with growth and oh, there's a little hummingbird out in your tree. Isn't that adorable? That's cute. I think with the lines, it's if you are like getting deeper into your Enneagram journey, I would say that maybe paying attention to not just your lines, but the other lines to also help navigate some of the relationships. I'm thinking about Maggie's question last
Oh,
week
yeah.
about like how you use this in your day to day. And to Holly's point, I think that your growth lines and your stress lines are something that you will see multiple times a day. Like
Yeah.
you could see yourself show up on the low side of your stress number multiple times a day, but you could also in the same day see yourself show up on the high side.
Yeah.
And just having the awareness to that will be helpful when you're in the moment.
Yeah. I think that's a good point around the awareness side and starting to recognize those behaviors. And then I think we talked about too when we were talking through Maggie's question last week about using it in relationships. There is a thing now where sometimes I'm still surprised, but most of the time I'm not surprised when somebody, if I know their Enneagram number and they show up in their stress space, I'm like, oh, they're stressed. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can see that behavior shift in them and that what it does is it creates a little more space to be like, okay, this isn't an excuse. I'm not telling you to let people off the hook for bad behavior. But it does create a little space to shift the conversation to be like, hey, you're showing up a little stressed.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that differently. Or does it give me space to just allow them a little grace and remember that what's happening isn't personal?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you and I have a friend, and she and I worked on a project together years ago. But she came into that project extremely stressed. Extremely stressed. She's also a 2. And after that happened, and I was really frustrated in the moment about how she was showing up, I was learning this about lines at the time. And what happened is I was able to go back and have a conversation with her and say, hey, did you realize that you were showing up like an 8? I know that's not your intention, but let's talk about that. And it shifted. I would say that was like a pivotal moment in her and I's relationship, just to be able to talk about it in a way that was not personal at all on either side. So I think when we talk about using it in the day-to-day, again, if you are in a circle of people who understand the Enneagram and are familiar with it, it just gives you another language to talk about things.
100%. I think an example I can give of my husband relatively recently, he was supposed to have his best friend in town, and they were going to have like a full weekend together, and it ended up getting canceled at the last minute. And then they just recently had their reschedule, and it was so great for them. But when it was canceled, my husband went to that withdrawing space. He's an 8, went to the low side of 5, really quiet, really bummed. His friend had a situation that they had to deal with at home that was like important. But it was an opportunity for me to notice and see, okay, he's really bummed. He's feeling stressed that he didn't get this time. And I'm just going to ask if he needs anything, and I'm going to leave it at that. So it's helpful, especially with my number and my anxiety around, is it me? Am I the problem? It's me. To be able to question, to get curious about, okay, it's probably not me.
Right.
What could it be? Oh, this
Yeah.
is the other thing that's going on. So I would say that it's not just helpful for the other person. It could be helpful for you individually and then collectively.
Yeah.
For your relationship is what I would add. But I'm curious to hear from a relationship aspect. We've talked about an episode potentially where if you're married to your wing, if you're married to your stretch line, or if you're in a really close relationship with one of those two things, married, dating, whatever, if you would be interested in chatting with us.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be super fun. Well, for us, that would be super
For
fun.
For you, it would be mildly uncomfortable.
Yeah, I apologize in advance.
We're not sorry.
I would love to have that conversation. I think we could talk about that too in terms of on the lines. We'll just touch on it really quick before we wrap up today, is that it is not uncommon to see within families people on opposite sides of those lines. And so for example, my mom is an 8, I am a 5. So she and I share that line. A friend of mine from the triathlon community, she is a 5, her sister is a 7. So there's a shared line there in their family where the two kids are showing up in like polar opposites within the same general environment.
Yeah.
So there are things like that. That's not a rule. There's no rules. That just is the case, I would say, a good percentage of the time, not all the time. I know several married couples that are married to the opposite as well. So you're one of them.
Yep.
2 married to an 8. That's actually the most common pairing that I know of.
That does not surprise me. It's that, at least from my 2 energy, it's like that need for protection.
Yeah.
And not like that fear of abandonment, where you have someone who's like very vigilant and like very
right. Take charge.
Protective. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of if there's any others. I do know a 3 and a 9 pairing as well. Married couple, she's a 3, he's a 9. That's what's like
very common.
Yeah, off the top of my head. I think the more I have more examples of it in families of siblings and parents probably than I do married couples that I'm aware of course.
Yeah.
Right. There could be.
So if you are interested in chatting with us, let us know. Or if you're interested in knowing what your spouse's number is, or if you want to ask us for a link to an assessment.
Yeah, we would be happy to help with all of that. The IEQ 9 also offers couples assessment. Have you done that?
I have not done the couples assessment. I mean, we could. I have both of our
Yeah.
stuff plugged into my portal.
Aaron and I did that. There is some interesting stuff that you can take away from just understanding how you might trigger each other. So that's also available through the Integrative 9 if you were interested in it. Getting that couples assessment, you would need to work with someone who's a certified coach to like get all the pieces in place to do that. But Tannah and I would be happy to help if you have interest in that.
Awesome.
All right. So I think we'll wrap on lines. We definitely owe an episode on Soul Child.
Yes, we do.
I almost feel like we should do an episode for each number on Soul Child. Again, we would love to have any of you who are listening be guests on the podcast.
Oh, if anyone would be interested in unpacking Soul Child with us,
yeah,
that could be really interesting.
Yes, that could be super fun. I have a friend who maybe would. I don't know how much she listens to the podcast. She's an 8. She might be listening to this podcast now. She might do it though.
I know of a 6 and a 9 who would do Soul Child.
So if you're interested in that, you should let us know so we can get some time scheduled out.
Yeah.
To be able to do that. We would love that.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, tag us, message us, comment.
Yep.
We're on all the social things. So TikTok, Instagram,
YouTube,
find us. Yep. YouTube, find us where podcasts live, Spotify, Apple.
Mm-hmm. I put us on iHeartRadio too. So if you're into a more obscure channel.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Holly.
Yeah.
Thanks for hosting. Oh my God.
Well, it was good. Look, I get to use my cute podcast couch that I've never used before.
I'm on the cozy couch.
Yeah.
Cozy couch.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, cool.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.